Hey guys, I'm Snake Eater. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Virpil MongoosT50 suite of flight/space sim controls. Now, I've been using these controls for the last couple weeks, and I think I've got enough saddle time with them to give a good first impression of the way they perform. Virpil has become popular because they offer controls that a lot of their competitors don't. For example, they have right and left sticks. They also have a throttle quadrant. Their sticks are interchangeable with bases, so you can use a Thrustmaster stick on these bases or vice versa, these sticks on a Thrustmaster base. The only thing they don't have are rudder pedals. Alright, let's get into the sticks, guys. The first stick I'm going to go over is this right-handed CH model. They call this the MongoosT50 CH. It's a right-handed stick. They don't make a left-handed version of this one. We'll get to that. It comes with a few special features that the other models don't have. Now, initially you'll notice that the finish is a shiny but matte finish. It's very comfortable. I really like the finish of it quite a lot. It's got Russian labels on all the buttons, which is a nice little touch. There's a few differences between this model and the standard models. The first one is this secondary trigger. It's got a larger paddle than the other sticks' secondary triggers. The next difference is this brake lever. This brake lever is longer and reinforced at the base. This is actually a pretty big deal considering when you pull this, you're usually pulling it decently hard with more than one finger. If you pull it all the way back, it'll actually come into contact with the stick. That means that there's no bending of this lever. On the other one, you'll see because it's shorter and less sturdy, you'll hit a stop and it'll bend a little bit. You'll feel a slight bend if you were really cranking on it. The final difference is the buttons, like this one, are flat on the top as opposed to dimpled. You can see some of the buttons are gray, but others are black. So it's a little bit of a hybrid between the all black version and the standard version, which has gray buttons. So this is the left-handed one. The left-handed one that I got is the all black version. It has no labels. It's got a sort of a black flat finish to it, more so than the CH version. You can see these buttons here are black dimpled as opposed to the fully flat buttons on the CH. You can see the size difference of the secondary trigger. Quite a bit smaller, a little bit harder to find blindly, but not a huge deal breaker. You can now see though that this lever is much shorter than the previous lever, and if you go to the stops, it stops there, which means if you pull past the stop, you'll get a little bit of a bend feel because it's plastic. It's not a deal breaker considering I use these levers for roll in Star Citizen, and as a result, I'm only putting small inputs into them because the roll is very sensitive. If I were actually using this for a hard brake, it might be an issue because you come to the stops and keep squeezing it, it'll feel like plastic, I guess. If you like all black, this is the one to get. This is the left-handed version. The right-handed version was sold out at the time, which is what led me to get the CH, and I'm glad it was. But they do sell a right-handed version of this stick. They both have the same BRD Warbird base. They have discontinued the T50 base. They say that they're going to get a new base out in the near future. We'll probably grab some of those and try those out when they do. But the beautiful thing about these is that the bases are the same. So you can swap these sticks out, you can swap the bases out, you could put a Thrustmaster stick on one of these, or you could put a Thrustmaster base on these sticks. All of those are options with Virpil. Inside, you can see that all the components are metal. This is where Virpil differs from Thrustmaster. You've got all of the gimbals and springs and attachments metal inside of this base, whereas the Thrustmaster is a plastic ball system. Thrustmaster bases are known to fail. They may last a while, but they are going to fail eventually, and you cannot buy the base separate from the stick, which means you're buying an entirely new stick. These bases run for $150 US, which is half the price of a Thrustmaster Warthog stick. So if this does ever fail, which it's less likely to, you can replace just the base and not your stick, or vice versa. So down the road, it could save you some money. The materials of these sticks: solid molded plastic, metal collars, metal bases, and metal components inside the bases. The ergonomics of the sticks are very good. They feel very good in the hand. The levers are very easy to reach. The triggers are a little bit interesting in that the secondary trigger feels like a more natural position than the primary triggers, which are a dual stage trigger. Initially, they felt very close to my other fingers, meaning it was almost like I was already in a fist when getting ready to pull the trigger, and when pulling the trigger, my fingers were all together. I don't know if you can see that. This is pulled, this is not pulled. It almost felt like the trigger was too close in. After having used it for a while, it's become more natural. It doesn't feel strange to me. This still does feel like a more natural distance, but you could, in theory, make this your primary trigger and these secondary triggers, but this one will not be a dual stage trigger. It has a slight forward lean to it, which gives it a very ergonomic position when you have it mounted in front of your armrests. All of the buttons are very easy to get to. One of the things that surprised me about this stick is it looked much larger in pictures than it did in person. It actually is a good thing, because I was concerned that this top section would be very large and it would be very hard to get to all the buttons up top. But in person, the stick is very well laid out and all the buttons are very reachable. Now, I do have pretty large hands, but they give you this little palm plate that gives you some adjustability depending on the size of your hand. The levers are far enough out of the way where it doesn't mess with your fingers when you are not using the lever, but they're close enough where if you need to grab it with even one pinky finger, you can. The resistance is fairly low on them, so it is not hard to articulate them. You don't need multiple fingers to do so, and that lends it really well to fine adjustments. Like I said, in Star Citizen, I use it for roll, and roll is cranked up on sensitivity, so I really, if I want to roll 90 degrees, I just tap it like this and it's 90-degree roll. I don't have to pull down hard on it to get it to move. As far as ergonomics goes, you've got to bring up the fact that it comes with ambidextrous options. So most stick companies don't make a right and a left-handed version. If anything, they make one that is either changeable but the same stick, or is a fully ambidextrous stick to begin with, which you end up losing some on ergonomics from that. The fact that they have a right and a left-handed option, at least in the standard and the black version of the stick, which is a huge plus for both people that are left-handed and for people using dual stick setups for space sims. Button layout. First, you got the triggers. You've got a dual stage primary and then a single stage secondary. Staying on the front part of the stick, you've got a pinky button and a brake lever. The brake lever is a feature that most sticks based on American aircraft do not have, and it has become invaluable. So you've got left, right, forward, back, and now you've got this brake lever, which can be tuned to be anything that requires an axis. What I mean is, on the Thrustmaster, this pinky lever is not an axis. In fact, it just presses a button. You can see that all it's doing is actuating a button. It's an on-off. This allows you to control things in small, finite amounts. So if you want a little bit of something or a lot of something, those are all options. Whereas on the button, it's on-off. You've got a button on the side. I do wish that this was a hat. Now on the Thrustmaster, it's a 3-position hat. On the VKB, it's a 3-position hat. Here it's just a button. It could be a hat. Finally, you've got a 2-way hat on the index finger side. All right, enough about the sticks. Let's check out the throttle. This thing is a beast. This is the MongoosT50 Throttle Quadrant. This thing is something that I wanted to make sure I picked up because its buttons are a little more generic, which is a good thing in my opinion. You've got these 8 buttons, all of which are custom mappable. You've got a protected switch, which could be an ejection or a self-destruct or what have you. You've got a couple of two-way switches. You've got 3 top and bottom toggleable switches. You've got a protected flat switch. You've got 2 axes dials here that have a stop in the middle. You've got 3 axes dials here that have stops on each unit, and they are push buttons. And then you've got a profile here which has 5 different profiles. Not only are there a tremendous number of buttons to bind on this, but you can also multiply that by 5 different profiles. The throttle quadrant, the throttle handle itself is a much more ergonomic handle than the Warthog. I'll show you a comparison here. You can see how your hand will be much more comfortable gripping this than the profile on the Thrustmaster. The Thrustmaster has this sort of lip right here, which definitely is grippable. You got a good handle on it, but it's got this sharp edge that, you know, is just not comfortable. These buttons are also sort of not laid out so that you can grab it easily. Now, you're normally pushing it and pulling it like this, but this is still just not something you want to rest your hand on, I've found. And you're limited. You only got 1 button and a hat and a slew joystick, which has limited value in most situations. On the Virpil, on the other hand, you've got several unique options. You've got a pinky button, you've got a ring finger button, and a index finger button. You've got a scroll wheel that has a stop or detent in the middle, and then you've got a 4-way hat on your index finger as well. You've got another button on the front, a 4-way hat, 4-way hat, and a 4-way hat. You can separate these 2 throttle levers if you want to. And you've got another axis that you can bind for flaps or any other function that you need an axis for. Something that you can't really see easily, but you can feel, is the detents. When you slide this forward, you can hear a nice satisfying click. It's almost like slamming a magazine home in a pistol or something. It's just this real satisfying, feels really good. You can set the detent for wherever you want. You can increase or decrease the resistance on the throttle lever itself. You can set the detent to a different place than 50%, which is the standard. You can set separate detents for each lever if you want. And of course you can adjust the resistance of the levers themselves. All right, so how do they actually feel in action? What is it like to fly with these sticks? The problems I had with the Thrustmaster stick were I would continuously overcorrect. I think it's because the mechanism within the Thrustmaster Warthog stick is too resistance based. The ball and socket system doesn't provide for a smooth transition of force from the beginning to the end. Now you can make adjustments to the Warthog stick. You can change the spring out for lower or higher resistances, but the fact of the matter is it's always going to be this ball and socket system. Now it's not horrible, it just is difficult to make small adjustments precisely. The other thing is that the throw on the Warthog stick is very short, meaning the distance from where you're moving or applying force and the joint is pretty short. Your hand is pretty close to that joint. These are basically at the same level. You compare the two, your hand is up here when you're moving this stick around versus down here when you're moving this stick around. That distance or throw gives you almost like a built-in extension, which gives you more fidelity when you're making small changes to the stick. The motion on the stick is very smooth. Now, what I have yet to try is the Cosmo cams or the other cams that came with the stick. And different spring tensions. These are stock. These are the stock with a stop in the middle. I haven't found it to be wanting, but for space flight, I have heard that the Cosmo cams, which have no stop in the middle, are the way to go. I'm looking forward to trying those out, but as a stock configuration, it feels like the resistance is slightly lower than the Warthog, which lends itself to smaller adjustments more easily. Having two of these puppies is incredibly useful in space dogfighting. Now, ordinarily, people will tell you that you should get the Deltas or a set of Thrustmaster 1600s that have twist on them because you need to control more axes in your flight in a space sim than you do in a flight sim. Normally, I would agree with that because normally flight sticks don't come with a third axis. These do, however. So because you've got these levers, you can bind those to roll, where ordinarily you would have no choice. You'd have to use a button for roll, which is not ideal. It's an on-off switch. It's not a fast or slow controllable lever. The reason I picked up the T50s instead of the Deltas is because I like the layout better. I feel like the ergonomics would be more satisfying, and I do a lot of DCS flight sim, which I would prefer to have a realistic feeling stick than a space flight stick while I'm flying an airplane. The Throttle Quadrant is something of a luxury when it comes to space flight sims because if you've got two sticks, you can use one of them for the throttle. But for ships that you're doing either cargo hauling or flying straight and level, for long distances, it's very handy to have just a normal throttle because you're not going to be doing a lot of strafing around in a big heavy cargo ship as an example. You also have a ton more buttons on this thing. So even if you never use this Throttle Quadrant, there's a bunch of buttons on here that you can expand to that you just can't get on your sticks. On your sticks, you prioritize for all the things you would need in a fight, and you run out of those options. I mean, you prioritize all those options on your sticks, and you are going to need to use the keyboard for most of your other items. I neglected to mention that these sticks also do come with these base plates. So if you don't have a mounting solution, you can attach to these and it's very stable. That being said, it is not as heavy as the Thrustmaster Warthog base plate, so you may need to figure out some way to secure it outside of just sitting it on your desk. You'll also notice that this is a pretty tall stick when sitting up on a desk. It's great that it's got the extra throw, but if you don't want to mount these in another way and you just want to set them up on a desk, you'll either need a tall chair or you're going to have your hands up here like this as opposed to lower on the table like a Warthog or a 1600. I should also mention what I use to mount these sticks are Fox mounts from foxmount.com. Comes with a custom engraved logo, pretty swanky stuff. They're fairly low profile, they're very stable, they're easily removed from the desk, and he makes models for almost all the sticks available. So I highly recommend Fox mounts for your mounting solutions. We'll do a little bit of a review on these in a later video. Okay, final thoughts on my switch from the Thrustmaster Warthog HOTAS to the Virpil dual stick and throttle system. Am I glad I switched? Absolutely. The quality level of these sticks and this throttle are second to none. The sticks initially felt very light. Not in a bad way, but it could feel like plastic in your hand or it could feel like carbon fiber in your hand. Once you get used to it though, you appreciate how light and smooth the control inputs are as compared to the Thrustmaster Warthog. The Throttle Quadrant is extremely satisfying to use. I haven't put it through its paces with a flight sim yet, but even just for the buttonology, it's worth it. Do I wish I had gotten the Deltas for space flight? No. A lot of people are gonna say that I should have gotten the Deltas if most of what I do is Star Citizen. They might be right. I haven't used the Deltas yet, but I don't have a regret going with the T50s. The T50s are extremely satisfying to use. The button layouts are outstanding and the ergonomics are top notch. If you guys have more questions about the Virpil MongoosT50 suite, please ask them below, or better yet, head over to the Twitch channel, snake_eater_co. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, head over to our Twitch channel, and we will be back very soon with another video.